Hey, happy Wednesday. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome back. More quarantine story time. We are still well in the midst of war and peace. And unfortunately, sometimes life imitates art because it seems like we're um, between war and peace right now in the US. Hey, I have the chat up. You can say hi if you like. But yeah, so here on my channel, the royal we, are taking a stand with people of color, supporting the Black Lives Matter movement. I wasn't sure if I should continue our readings, as maybe be a good time to give space for other voices. I think for now we will continue the readings, and I'll be including links in the video description at the end with be researching links on ways we can donate, ways we can get involved, ways we can get educated or give, or other ways we can support racial equality here in America and around the world too. But definitely it's something that, as we are in America, it's definitely something that has been a long time problem. Probably I would say 400 years at least. So we can all do something about that. And even if it is like, for me, it's a lot of like challenging of my own mindsets and things that I've been programmed in and I take for granted as a person, a white person. So I would like to take a stand with all people of color to fight inequality by your side. So, like I said, I'm not always exactly sure how to do that, so we'll be doing the best I can. Feel free to, if anyone has any ideas, things we can do together, that'd be great. But like I said, for now, I will probably just start putting links at the bottom in my video comments at the end, or maybe even in the live chat during, ways that we can get involved. So thank you. Keep one another safe, and stand up for each other's rights. And look out, because there is other people who are trying. There's always forces of evil who are trying to combat good. So stand for the good. Keep your eye out for the bad. Be safe, everybody. As we've been being safe all quarantine, hopefully. Today we are gonna jump back in though for now and pick up just after the dance party where Natasha Rostov danced with Denisov, and he was very attentive to her. And Sonia was proposed to by Dolokhov just before that, and she turned him down because she's still in love with Nikolai Rostov, and Nikolai Rostov is like mad that Dolokhov proposed, but also like not ready to, like he also doesn't want to commit to Sonia anyways. So classic, he wants it both ways. He's like, I don't want you to be with someone else, but also I'm not ready to marry you. So isn't that just the way that we always want it both ways? So we are in volume 2, part 1, and we're going to finish part 1 today. So it'll be volume 2, we'll do sections 13, 14, 15, and 16, which sounds like a lot, but it's really not that much. So yeah, that's what I put in, right? 13, 14, 15, 16. Anyways, let's jump in. Let me know if you guys have any questions, and here we go. Section 13. For 2 days after that, Rostov did not see Dolokhov at his house and could not find him at home. On the third day, he received a note from him. Since I do not intend to frequent your house anymore for reasons known to you, and am leaving for the army, tonight I'm giving a farewell party for my friends come to the English Hotel. That evening, after 9 o'clock, Rostov went to the English Hotel from the theater, where he had been with his family and Denisov. He was brought at once to the best rooms of the hotel, taken for the night by Dolokhov. Some 20 men crowded around the table at which Dolokhov sat between 2 candles. On the table lay gold and banknotes. Dolokhov kept the bank. Nikolai had not seen Dolokhov since his proposal and Sonia's refusal, and he felt embarrassed at the thought of how they might meet. Dólokhov's light, cold gaze met Rostov at the door, as if he had long been waiting for him. "We haven't seen each other for a long time," he said. "Thank you for coming. Just let me finish the game, and Ilyushka will come with the chorus." "I called at your place," Rostov said, blushing. Dólokhov did not reply. "You can stake," he said. Rostov remembered at that moment a strange conversation he had once had with Dólokhov. "Only fools can gamble on luck," Dólokhov had said then. "Or are you afraid to play with me?" Dólokhov said now, as if guessing Rostov's thought, and he smiled. Behind his smile, Rostov saw in him that mood he had been in during the night at the club, and generally at those times when, bored with everyday life, Dólokhov felt the necessity of getting out of it by some strange, most often cruel, act. Rostov felt awkward. He sought and could not find in his mind a joke which would reply to Dólokhov's words. But before he managed to do it, Dólokhov, looking straight in Rostov's face, said to him, slowly and measuredly, so that everyone could hear, "Remember, we talked once about gambling. He's a fool who wants to gamble on luck. Gambling needs certainty. But I want to try it." "Try gambling on luck or on certainty?" Rostov wondered. "But you'd better not gamble," Dólokhov added, and flexing a newly opened deck, he said, "Bank, gentlemen." Moving money forward, Dólokhov prepared to keep the bank. Rostov sat beside him and at first did not play. Dólokhov kept glancing at him. "Why aren't you playing?" said Dólokhov, and strangely Nikolai felt. "I have no money with me," said Rostov. "I'll trust you." Rostov staked 5 rubles and lost, staked once more and lost again. Dólokhov killed, that is won, 10 cards in a row from Rostov. "Gentlemen," he said, after keeping the bank for a while, "I ask you to put your money on your cards, otherwise I may get confused in the accounting." One of the players said he had hoped he could be trusted. "That I can do, but I'm afraid to get confused. I asked you to put money on the cards," replied Dólokhov. "And don't you be shy, we'll settle our accounts," he added, turning to Rostov. The game went on. A servant constantly went around with champagne. All of Rostov's cards were beaten, and 800 rubles were already scored against him. Dang. He wrote 800 rubles on a card, but while champagne was served to him, he changed his mind and again wrote an ordinary stake, 20 rubles. "Leave it," said Dólokhov, though it seemed he was not even looking at Rostov. "You'll win it back the sooner. I let the others win, but you I beat. Or are you afraid to lose to me?" he repeated. Rostov obeyed, left the 800 as written, and laid down a 7 of hearts, with a torn corner that he had picked up from the floor. He remembered it very well afterwards. He laid down 7 of hearts and wrote 800 above it with a piece of chalk in round, straight figures, drank the glass of now warm champagne that had been served him, smiled at Dólokhov's words, and waited with a sinking heart for a 7. Began watching Dólokhov's hands which held the deck. The winning or losing of this 7 meant a lot to Rostov. Last Sunday, Count Ilya Andreevich had given his son 2,000 rubles, and he, who never liked to talk about money problems, had told him that this money was the last until May, and that he therefore asked his son to be more economical this time. Nikolai had said that it was even too much for him, and on his word of honor he would not ask for more money until spring. He now had 1,200 rubles of that money left. Therefore, the 7 of hearts meant not only the loss of 1,600 rubles, but the necessity of breaking his word. With a sinking heart, he watched Dólokhov's hand and thought, "Well, be quick, deal me the card. I'll take my cap and go home to have supper with Denisov, Natasha, and Sonia, and will certainly never touch cards again." At that moment, his life at home, jokes with Petya, talks with Sonia, duets with Natasha, piquet with his father, even his quiet bed in the house on Povarovskaya, presented itself to him with such forced clarity and delight, as though it were all a long-past loss and unappreciated happiness. He could not imagine that stupid chance, making the 7 fall to the right rather than the left, could have deprived him of all this newly understood, newly illuminated happiness, and cast him into an abyss of as yet unexperienced and undefined misfortune. It could not be, but even so he waited with sinking heart for the movement of Dólokhov's hands. Those broad-boned, reddish hands, with hair growing from under the cuffs, set down the deck of cards, took the glass and pipe that had been served him. "So you're not afraid to gamble with me?" Dólokhov repeated. and, as if in order to tell a merry story, he set the cards down, leaned back in his chair, and with a smile slowly began to speak. Yes, gentlemen, I've been told there's a rumor going around Moscow that I'm a card sharper, so I advise you to be more careful with me. Well, deal then, said Rostov. Ah, these Moscow gossips, said Dólokhov, and he picked up the cards with a smile. Ah, Rostov nearly cried, seizing his hair with both hands. The 7 he needed was lying on top, the first card in the deck. He had lost more than he could pay. Don't overdo it, though, said Dólokhov, with a fleeting glance at Rostov, and he went on dealing. An hour and a half later, most of the players looked upon their own game as a joke. The whole game was concentrated on Rostov alone. Instead of 600 rubles, he had a long column of figures scored against him, which he had reckoned up to 10,000, but which by now, as he dimly supposed, had already risen to 15,000. In fact, the score nearly exceeded 20,000 rubles. Dólokhov no longer listened or told stories. He watched every movement of Rostov's hand, and from time to time quickly glanced through his score. He had decided to continue playing until the score grew to 43,000. He had chosen this number because 43 made up the sum of his age plus Sonia's. Rostov, his head propped in both hands, sat at the written-on, wine-stained, card-strewn table. One tormenting impression would not leave him. Those broad-boned, reddish hands with hair showing from under the cuffs, those hands which he loved and hated, and which held him in their power. 600 rubles, ace, corner, 9. I can't win it all back, and how cheerful it would be at home. A jack, ah no, it can't be. And why is he doing this to me? Rostov thought and tried to recall. Occasionally he staked a large sum, but Dólokhov refused to play and set the stake himself. Nikolai obeyed him, and first he prayed to God, as he had prayed during the battle at the Amstetten Bridge. Then he decided that the first card that came to the hand from the pile of bent cards under the table would be the one to save him. Then he counted the cords on his jacket, and those cords would be the same number to stake against his entire loss. Then he looked at the other players for help. Then he peered into the now cold face of Dólokhov and tried to figure out what was going on in him. He does know what this loss means to me, he said to himself. Can he really wish for my ruin? He used to be my friend. I loved him. But it's not his fault either. What can he do if he's in luck? Nor is it my fault, he said to himself. I've done nothing wrong. Did I kill anyone, insult, or even wish evil to anyone? Why then such a terrible misfortune? And when did it start? Just now, when I came to this table wishing to win 100 rubles to buy that sewing box for Mama's birthday and go home. I was so happy, so free, so cheerful, and I didn't realize then how happy I was. When did it end, and when did this new, terrible condition begin? What marked the change? I kept sitting in the same way, in this place, at this table, choosing cards and playing them, and watching those broad-boned, deft hands. When did it happen, and what has happened? I'm healthy, strong. I'm the same, and in the same place. No, it can't be. Surely it will all come to nothing. He was red, all in a sweat, though it was not hot in the room, and his face was frightful and pitiful, especially in its important desire to seem calm. The score reached the fateful number of 43,000. Rostov prepared a card which was to go corners on the 3,000 just given him. When Dólokhov tapped the deck on the table, set it aside, and taking the chalk, quickly began in his clear, strong hand, breaking the piece of chalk to add up Rostov's score. Supper! Time for supper! The gypsies are here. Indeed, some dark-haired men and women, saying something with a gypsy accent, were already coming in from the cold. Nikolai knew it was all over, but he said in an indifferent voice, So you won't go on? I have a really nice card ready, as if he was the most interested in the amusement of the game itself. It's all over. I'm lost, he thought. A bullet in the head is all that's left for me. And at the same time, he said in a cheerful voice, Well, one more little card. All right, said Dólokhov, having finished reckoning. All right, I'll go 21 rubles. He pointed to the difference of the 21. I'll go 21 rubles, he said, pointing to the difference of the 21 rubles over the exact sum of 43,000, and taking the deck, preparing to deal. Rostov obediently unbent the corner, and instead of the 6,000 he had prepared, carefully wrote 21. It's all the same to me, he said. I'm just curious to know whether you'll kill this 10 or let me win it. Dólokhov gravely began to deal. Oh, how Rostov hated at that moment those reddish hands with their short fingers and the hair sticking out from the cuffs, which had held him in their power. He won the 10. You owe me 43,000, Count, said Dólokhov, and he stood up from the table and stretched. I'm tired, though, to sit so long, he said. Yes, I'm tired, too, said Rostov. Dólokhov, as if to remind him that it was unsuitable for him to joke, interrupted him. When will I get the money, Count, if you please? Rostov flushed and invited Dólokhov to another room. If I can't pay it all, I suppose you'll accept a promissory note, he said. Listen, Rostov, said Dólokhov, smiling brightly and looking into Nikolai's eyes. You know the saying, lucky in love, unlucky at cards. Your cousin's in love with you, I know it. Oh, it's terrible to feel myself so much in this man's power, thought Rostov. Rostov knew what a blow he would deal to his mother, in announcing this loss. He knew what happiness it would be to be delivered of it all, and he realized that Dólokhov knew he could deliver him from this shame and grief, but still wanted to play with him as a cat plays with a mouse. Your cousin, Dólokhov tried to begin, but Nikolai interrupted him. My cousin has nothing to do with it, and there is no point in talking about her, he cried in a rage. So when will I get it? Asked Dólokhov. Tomorrow, Rostov said, and left the room. To say tomorrow and keep up the tone of prosperity. Section 15. To say tomorrow and keep up the tone of propriety was not difficult, but to come home alone, to see his sisters, brother, mother, father, to confess and ask for money to which he had no right after giving his word of honor, was terrible. At home no one was asleep. The young people of the Rostovs' house, having come back from the theater and had supper, were sitting by the clavichord. As soon as Nikolai came into the reception room, he was enveloped by that amorous, poetic atmosphere which had prevailed in their house that winter, and which now, after Dólokhov's proposal and Iagel's ball, seemed to thicken still more, like the air before a thunderstorm, over Sonia and Natasha. Sonia and Natasha, in the light blue dresses they had worn to the theater, pretty and knowing it, happy, smiling, stood by the clavichord. Vera and Shinshin were playing chess in the drawing-room. The old countess, waiting for her son and husband, was playing patience with an old gentlewoman who lived in their house. Denisov, eyes shining and hair disheveled, was sitting, his leg thrust back, at the clavichord, banging out chords on it with his stubby fingers, and his eyes rolling, was singing in his small, hoarse, but still true voice, some verse of his own composition. The Sorceress, which he was trying to set to music. Sorceress, tell me by what art thou drawest me to abandon strings. What fire hast thou instilled in my heart? What rapture through my fingers sings? He sang in a passionate voice, his agate black eyes flashing at the frightened and happy Natasha. Splendid! Excellent! Cried Natasha. Another stanza, she said, not noticing Nikolai. For them, everything's the same, thought Nikolai, peering into the drawing-room, where he saw Vera and his mother with the little old lady. Ah, here's Nikolenka! Natasha ran over to him. Is Papa at home? He asked. I'm so glad you've come, Natasha said without replying. We're having such fun. Vasily Dmitrich is staying one more day for my sake, you know. No, Papa hasn't come yet, said Sonia. Coco, you're home. Come here to me, my dearest, the countess's voice came from the drawing-room. Nikolai went over to his mother, kissed her hand, and silently sat down at her table, and began washing her hands, which were laying out cards. From the reception room came laughter and merry voices persuading Natasha. Well, all right, cried Denisov. Now there's no point out of it. You owe us a bagrakol. I beg you. The countess glanced at her silent son. What's the matter? The mother asked Nikolai. Oh, nothing, he said, as if he was already sick of this one and the same question. Will Papa come soon? I think so. For them, everything's the same. They don't know anything. What am I to do with myself, thought Nikolai. And he went back to the reception room, where the clavichord stood. Sonia was standing at the clavichord and playing the prelude to the barcarolle that Denisov especially liked. Natasha was preparing to sing. Denisov was looking at her with rapturous eyes. Nikolai began pacing up and down the room. Why on earth make her sing? What can she sing? There's no fun in it at all, thought Nikolai. Sonia played the first chord of the prelude. My God, I'm a dishonest, lost man. A bullet in my head is all that's left for me. Not singing, he thought. Go away, but where? Never mind, let them sing. Nikolai continued to pace the room, glanced gloomily at Denisov and the girls, avoiding their eyes. Nikolenka, what's the matter with you? Asked Sonia's eyes. Turned to him. She saw at once that something had happened to him. Nikolai turned away from her. Natasha, with her sensitivity, also instantly noticed her brother's state. She noticed it, but she felt so merry herself at that moment, and she was so far from grief, sorrow, reproach, that she would purposefully deceived herself, as often happens with young people. No, I'm too merry now to spoil my merriment by sympathy for someone else's grief, she felt, and said to herself, no, I'm surely mistaken. He must be as merry as I am. Well, Sonia, she said, and went out to the very middle of the reception room, where, in her opinion, the residence was the best. Raising her head, lowering her lifelessly hanging arms as dancers do, Natasha made a few energetic steps from heel to toe in the middle of the room and stopped. Here I am, she seemed to be saying, responding to the rapturous gaze of Denisov, who was watching her. Oh, what's she so glad about? Thought Nikolai, looking at his sister. How is it she's not bored and ashamed? Natasha took the first note. Her throat expanded, her chest straightened, her eyes acquired a serious expression. She did not think of anyone or anything at that moment, and from her lips composed into a smile, sounds poured forth, sounds that anyone can produce for the same lengths of time, at the same intervals, but which leave one cold 1,000 times. Then for the 1,001st time, make one terrible and weep. That winter, Natasha had begun to sing seriously for the first time, especially because Denisov admired her singing. She no longer sang like a child. There was none of that comic, childish assiduousness in her singing, which had been in it before, but her singing was not good yet, as all the critical connoisseurs said who had heard her sing. Her voice has no polish. It's beautiful, but it needs polish, they all said. But they usually said it long after her voice had fallen silent. While this unpolished voice with its wrong breathing and strange transitions was singing, even the critical connoisseurs said nothing and merely enjoyed this unpolished voice, merely wanted to hear it again. Her voice had that virgin, intact quality, that unawareness of its strength, that unpolished velvetiness, which was so combined with a deficiency in the art of singing that it seemed impossible to change anything in this voice without spoiling it. What on earth is this, thought Nikolai, hearing her voice and opening his eyes wide. What's happened with her? How she sings today, he thought. And suddenly the whole world became concentrated for him on the expectation of the next note, the next phrase, and everything in the world became divided into 3 beats. O mio crudele effetto. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1. O mio crudele effetto. 1, 2, 3, 1. Ah, our foolish life, thought Nikolai. All this misfortune and money and Dolokhov and spite and honor, it's all nonsense, and here is the real thing. Ah, Natasha, ah, darling, ah, dearest, how is she going to take this B? She did it, thank God. And without noticing it, he himself was singing so as to strengthen that B, taking the single voice a third below the high note. Taking the second voice a third below the high note. My God, how beautiful. Did I sing that? What happiness, he thought. Oh, how that third had vibrated, and how touch was something that was best in Rostov's soul, and that something was independent of anything in the world and higher than anything in the world. What are gambling losses and Dolokhovs and words of honor? It's all nonsense. One can kill and steal and still be happy. Section 16. It was long since Rostov had experienced such enjoyment from music as on that day, but as soon as Natasha finished her bar carole, reality again reminded him of itself. Saying nothing, he left and went downstairs to his room. A quarter of an hour later, the old count, merry and content, came home from the club. Nikolai, hearing him come, went to him. Well, did you have a good time? Asked Ilya Andreevich, smiling joyfully and proudly to his son. Nikolai wanted to say yes, but could not. He all but burst into sobs. The count was lighting his pipe and did not notice his son's state. It's inevitable, Nikolai thought for the first and last time, and suddenly, in the most casual tone, which made him seem vile to himself, as if he was asking for a carriage in order to go to town, he said to his father, Papa, I've come on business. I nearly forgot. I need money. Well now, said his father, who was in an especially cheerful mood, I told you it wouldn't be enough. How much? Very much, said Nikolai, blushing and with a stupid, casual smile, for which he could not forgive himself for a long time afterwards. I've lost a bit at cards. That is, a good deal, even a very good deal, 43,000. What? To whom? You're joking, the Count cried, his neck and nape suddenly turning into an apoplectic red, as happens with old people. I promise to pay tomorrow, said Nikolai. Well, said the old Count, spreading his arms and sinking strengthlessly onto the sofa. No help for it. It happens to everyone, his son said in a careless, brazen tone, while in his soul he considered himself a villain, a scoundrel, whose whole life would not be enough to redeem this crime. He would have liked to kiss his father's hands, to go to his knees and ask forgiveness, yet he said in a careless and even rude tone that it happened to everybody. Hearing his son's words, Count Ilya Andreich lowered his eyes and began fussing about, as if looking for something. Yes, he said, it's hard. I'm afraid it's hard to find. It happens, yes, it happens to everybody. And giving his son a fleeting look, the Count started out of the room. Nikolai had been prepared for a rebuff, but he had never expected this. Papa! Papa! He cried after him, sobbing. Forgive me! And seizing his father's hands, he pressed his lips to it and wept. While father and son were having a talk, a no less important talk was going on between mother and daughter. Natasha, excited, had come running to her mother. Mama, he what? He proposed to me. Mama, she cried. The Countess could not believe her ears. Denisov had proposed. To whom? To this tiny little girl, Natasha, who still recently was playing with dolls and having lessons even now? Natasha, enough of this silliness, she said, still hoping it was a joke. Well, there, silliness, I'm telling you a real thing, Natasha said crossly. I come to ask you what to do, and you say silliness. The Countess shrugged her shoulders. If it's true that Monsieur Denisov has proposed to you, ridiculous as it is, tell him he's a fool, that's all. No, he's not a fool, Natasha said in an offended and serious tone. Well, what do you want then? You're all in love these days. Well, if you're in love, marry him, the Countess said, laughing crossly. God help you. No, Mama, I'm not in love with him. It must be I'm not in love with him. Well, then tell him no. Mama, why are you cross? Don't be cross, dearest. Is it my fault? No, but what then, my dear? Would you like me to go and tell him? The Countess said, smiling. No, I'll do it. Only teach me how. Everything's so easy for you, she added, responding to her smile. If you'd seen how he said it to me. Oh, I know he didn't want to say it, but just said it by accident. Well, even so, you must refuse him. No, I mustn't. I'm so sorry for him. He's so nice. Well, then accept his proposal. It's really nice you were married. It's really time you were married, her mother said crossly and mockingly. No, Mama, I'm sorry for him. I don't know how to tell him. There's no need for you to tell him. I'll tell him myself, said the Countess, indignant that someone had dared to consider her little Natasha a grown-up. No, not for anything. I'll do it, and you go and listen at the door. And Natasha ran across the drawing room to the reception room where Denisov was sitting at the same table, sitting on the same chair, at the clavichord, covering his face with his hands. At the sound of her light footsteps, he jumped up. Natalie, he said, going to her with quick steps, decide my fate. It is in your hands. Vasily Dmitrich, I'm so sorry for you. No, but you're so nice. But you mustn't, But I'll always love you like this. Denisov bent over her hand, and she heard strange, incomprehensible sounds. She kissed him on his black, tousled, curly head. At that moment there was a very hasty rustle of the Countess's skirt. She went up to them. Vasily Dmitrich, I thank you for the honor, the Countess said, in an embarrassed tone which seemed stern to Denisov. But my daughter is so young, and I thought that you, as my son's friend, would have addressed me first. In that case, you would not have brought me to the necessity of a refusal. Countess, said Denisov, with lowered eyes and a guilty look, and he was about to say something more but faltered. Natasha could not calmly see him so pitiful. She began to sob loudly. Countess, I'm to blame before you, Denisov went on in a halting voice. But know that I adore your daughter and your whole family so much that I would give 2 lives. He looked at the Countess, and noticing her stern face, Goodbye, Countess, he said, kissed her hand, and without looking at Natasha, with quick, resolute steps, left the room. The next day Rostov saw off Denisov, who did not want to remain in Moscow a day longer. All Denisov's Moscow friends were seeing him off at the gypsies, and he did not remember how he was put in the sleigh and driven the first 3 posting stations. After Denisov's departure, Rostov, waiting for the money which the old Count could not raise all at once, spent 2 more weeks in Moscow without leaving the house, mostly in the young lady's room. Sonia was more devoted and tender to him than ever. It was as if she wanted to show him that his loss at cards was a feat which made her love him still more, but Nikolai now considered himself unworthy of her. He covered the girls' albums with verses and music, and without taking leave of any of his acquaintances, having finally sent off the entire 43,000 and received Dolokhal's receipt, left at the end of November to catch up with his regiment, which was already in Poland. And that's the end of part 1. Ah, the children. I figured Denisov was falling in love with Natasha. And Natasha's so funny. She's just such a whirlwind of emotion. But I love the thing about her. She's sort of a sensitive person, cares a lot about her brother, but when she's so happy, she's like, I'm too merry now to spoil my merriment. My sympathy for someone else is what she felt. I feel like we can all feel that way sometimes. But that's why we all grow up, right? And learn that our own joy and merriment isn't always enough. She's very mature. She's like not even 16 though. Yeah, so yeah, and she is a sweet child. You know, she's like not even 16. Hormone time. Come on. But as adults, I think we all have to take that maturity and high road of acknowledging that what we feel and our own happiness isn't always as important sometimes as caring for someone else's unhappiness. So that's my little philosophical moment for today. Yeah, so we're making progress, folks. We'll jump back in tomorrow, and I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna try to start including links of things we can do and actions that we can take to that end of caring for other people and their pain more than our own temporary happiness. So yeah, thank you all very much. I hope you're having a great day. Stay safe and wise and loving out there. See you tomorrow.